Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Just when you thought it couldn't go worse, Donald Trump has done it. He has raised tariffs on China to 245%. He is also warning America's trade partners in Europe, choose between the US and China. So Trump is taking the war beyond America. Meanwhile, China says it is open to talks, but the US should show respect first. Other countries are planning stimulus packages to cushion their economies from the trade war. And Russia is benefiting from all of this. As the US dollar falls, the Russian ruble is soaring. It is the world's top performing currency. It is doing better than gold. We'll explain why. How is India faring? Inflation has fallen, but the latest projections say that growth may fall too. And the recession fears still loom in America. You don't need big headlines to see it. Small indicators like lipstick and lunch sales also tell a story. And amid all of this, China continues its TikTok strikes, exposing the dirty secrets of Western luxury brands one video at a time. In Ukraine, they have a new plan to fix the cash crunch, legalize pornography. In Sudan, 2 years of war and now the country may be divided. In Kenya, gang smuggling ants have been arrested. Yes, we're talking about the insects, ants. Who is buying smuggled ants and why? We will tell you. And why global wine sales are falling. They're at their lowest level since 1961. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. US Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife Usha to travel to India next week. During his visit, Vance will meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And other than Delhi, the second family of the US will also be visiting Jaipur and Agra. Usha Vance is the first Indian-American second lady. Before India, Vance and his family will be traveling to Italy. Pakistan's Foreign Secretary lands in Bangladesh to hold bilateral meetings. The talks will take place in Dhaka tomorrow. The last time the foreign secretaries of the two countries met was 15 years ago. The Pakistani official is also likely to meet Bangladesh's interim leader Mohammad Yunus. Ties between Islamabad and Dhaka have improved since the ouster of Sheikh Hasina last August. Iran's foreign minister will visit Russia tomorrow. Last week, Tehran held indirect talks with Washington over its nuclear program. The United Nations nuclear watchdog has warned that Iran is not far from having a nuclear bomb. Moscow, a party to Iran's 2015 nuclear pact, supports Tehran's right to have a civilian nuclear program. The UK Supreme Court rules on the legal definition of a woman, says it is based on a person's sex at birth. This landmark decision comes amid a bitter debate over trans rights. The ruling is a setback for the Scottish government. It will prevent transgender women from positions set aside for women. And the European Union approves the sale of a new Alzheimer's drug, but says it can only be sold under strict conditions. The drug will be used to treat adults who are in the early stages of the Alzheimer's disease. It was approved in the US 2 years ago. $10, $20, $54, $104, $145 and $245. This is not a cricket scorecard. This is Donald Trump's tariffs on China. It began with a 10% levy in February. It now stands at 245%. I'll repeat that for you. The US has increased tariffs on China to 245%. The White House announced it yesterday, though this time with less fanfare. No grandstanding by the press secretary, no all-caps post on Truth Social. Instead, this announcement was sneaked into a White House fact sheet. And the reason for this hike? Because China retaliated. Trump says 75 countries have reached out to him. They want to strike a deal with the US, but China has not reached out. Instead, they have imposed a 125% tariff on the US. So what does Trump do? He hikes it again to 245%. The White House says the ball is now in China's court.
Look, the president has made his position on China quite clear, although I do have an additional statement that he just shared with me in the Oval Office. The ball is in China's court. China needs to make a deal with us. We don't have to make a deal with them.
Forget the ball. There is no court left to play in. A 245% tariff is not a pressure tactic or a retaliation. It is simply an ego move. You just heard the press secretary. She says that China needs to make a deal with the US, not the other way around. China should be the one making the deal. So clearly the White House wants a deal with China. They just want Beijing to make the first move. The question is, how will China respond? Beijing had ruled out further tariff hikes last week. They said anything more than 125% is a joke. That is China's tariff on the US, 125%. They will not hike it further. As for talks, China is open to it. They have appointed a new trade envoy for negotiations, but only on the basis of mutual respect.
If the U.S. truly wants to resolve the issue through dialogue and negotiation, it should stop its practice of maximum pressure and cease with threats and blackmail. Instead, it should engage in talks with China on the basis of equality, mutual respect, and reciprocity.
Let me recap that for you. The US wants China to pick up the phone and call Donald Trump, but China is saying, stop the bullying. Lift the tariffs first and then we can talk. Like I said, it's an ego battle. Neither side wants to appear weak, and Trump is going the extra mile. The tariffs are just one part of his strategy. He's piling the pressure on his allies too. A top Trump official has issued an ultimatum to Europe. He wants Brussels to pick between American and Chinese technology, specifically communications technology. Let me give you the background here. Elon Musk's Starlink is trying to enter the European market, but a lot of countries are apprehensive. They do not like his meddling in European politics, nor do they like his president's tariffs, the US president's tariffs. So what does the US do? It issues a Bollywood-style ultimatum. Either pick us or the Chinese. Let me quote what US officials said. If you're concerned about Starlink, just wait for the Chinese Communist Party's version. Then you'll be really worried. Now, to be fair, he does have a point. The problem is the Americans are also unreliable. It's like a rerun of the Cold War. Back then, the Americans had the same attitude. You're either with us or against us. And Trump is reviving that Cold War approach. It's bad news for America's trading partners. Until now, the trade war was limited to the US and China, but now Trump is taking it beyond those arenas. He is asking other countries to publicly choose. And China knows this. They know that many countries are rethinking their partnership with the US, so they're trying to cash in. And China's strategy has been twofold. The first is to attack the US. No diplomacy or outreach, just full-on wolf warrior attacks. China's state media is taking the lead here. Let me quote from their recent piece. This was published in a Chinese mouthpiece. The US is not getting ripped off by anybody. The problem is the US has been living beyond its means for decades. It consumes more than it produces. The US should stop whining about itself being a victim in global trade and put an end to its capricious and destructive behavior. Now, this approach has a clear motive: to present China as a challenger to the US, as the only country standing up to Donald Trump. Which brings us to the second part of China's strategy, reaching out to partners. Xi Jinping is on a tour of Southeast Asia. He has visited Vietnam and Malaysia already. His next stop is Cambodia. Do you know what's common between all these countries? All of them face steep tariffs from Donald Trump. So Xi Jinping is sweeping in as a savior, as the wise statesman who is taking on Trump. Listen to what he said.
We must uphold the multilateral trading system, keep global industrial and supply chains stable, and maintain an international environment of openness and cooperation.
How about that? China is preaching cooperation and openness. On most days, it would sound absurd. But then you look at Donald Trump and you think, maybe not. The US is squandering its goodwill across the world and by extension, playing into China's hands. This is a clash between the art of the deal and the art of war. Let's see how it unfolds. So Trump has raised tariffs on China once again. His trade policies are setting off alarm bells across the globe. World leaders are scrambling to contain the fallout. How will they respond to Trump's tariffs? What is their toolkit of choice? Stimulus, pumping cash into the economy. It is a time-tested strategy, and many major economies are now deploying it, like South Korea, which has unveiled a supplementary budget. This package is worth over $8 billion. And where will this extra money go? In managing the risks from Trump's trade war and in boosting South Korea's AI capabilities. That alone, the AI capabilities, will get about a third of this fund, a third of $8 billion. At the same time, Seoul is exploring negotiations with Washington. It will soon send a team to the US to try to cut a deal with the Trump administration. Of course, there's no guarantee of a deal, which is why South Korea has armed itself with a financial war chest. Same with Portugal. They have announced an $11 billion package. Their prime minister says, and I'm quoting, "The world we knew has changed." His name is Luis Montenegro. He's the Portuguese prime minister, and he says that his country must adapt quickly to this changing reality. Portugal's neighbor Spain is doing the same thing. Last week, the Spanish government announced a $15 billion package. And just like Portugal, it's a mix of loans and direct aid. Spain plans to boost spending in defense.
The objective of this plan is for Spain to contribute to and, at the same time, benefit from this technological and industrial stimulus to strengthen the European security and defense area, while remaining faithful to our principles.
Stimulus packages are direct interventions. Clearly, these countries don't want to wait for Trump to change his mind and offer concessions, and that is why they are resorting to stimulus and building a safety net around their economies. China is under pressure to follow suit. In fact, Beijing could be readying a package as we speak. Analysts predict a massive stimulus push of up to $275 billion, $275 billion China stimulus package. Last month, Beijing raised its deficit target. Now, what's a deficit? When a government spends more than it earns, when its expenses are higher than its income, that gap is called a budget deficit. Now, earlier, China was targeting a deficit of 3%, but last month, they raised it to 4%. This gives Beijing more room to spend, more firepower to protect their economy. In the month of March, the government also dropped some hints.
To cope with possible external and domestic uncertainties, the central government has also set aside ample reserve tools and policy space.
Now, this is not new. Most governments resort to a stimulus package during a crisis. We saw it happen during the 2008 crash. We also saw it happen during the pandemic. Stimulus packages keep economies afloat. But this time, the threat is different. This time, it's a trade war and the rising risk of recession. The markets are still wobbly. Share prices are seesawing. If Trump reimposes his tariffs, there could be another mass sell-off. Businesses and their bottom lines would suffer, costs would rise, profit margins would fall, and economies could plunge into recession. Trump's gamble on tariffs has raised all these fears. In the US alone, the probability of a recession is as high as 60%. And the global economy is flashing warning signs. The IEA has slashed the demand for oil for 2025. The IEA is the International Energy Agency. It predicts lower demand for oil. So does the OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. This is the world's biggest and most powerful oil cartel. Now, both these groups blame the rising trade tensions for this, for projecting lower oil demand. You see, global growth is slowing. So even if you cut oil prices, it may not be enough to lift demand. hence the need for a stimulus. It can cushion the blow, support jobs, prop up demand, and restore market confidence, but it's not a silver bullet. If Trump's tariff war continues, and if his tariffs rise further, no amount of cash may be enough. Because this is not just a financial storm, it is also a political one. The global economy as we know it is being reshaped. There could be more painful days ahead. Now let's talk about Russia. It is an outlier in the global trade war. Donald Trump has spared Russia from his tariffs, and that is clearly helping the Russian economy. Their currency, the ruble, is soaring. Against the odds, the ruble has become the best performing currency in the world. It has surged past every major competitor, including gold. The Russian currency is doing better than gold. Remember, gold is the go-to safe haven during tough times, but today the ruble is doing better than gold. This year, it has gained 38% against the US dollar, a 38% rise in the global market. The dollar, on the other hand, is struggling. You could say Trump crashed the dollar with his tariffs. His trade war has triggered a major crisis of confidence in the greenback. But that's not the only reason why the ruble is shining. Overall, Moscow's economic strategy is working. Three factors are driving the ruble's rise. First, a political thaw between Putin and Trump. This has eased fears about the future of the Russian economy. It has boosted confidence in Russian assets. Second, tight monetary controls. Russia has curbed the demand for foreign goods. This has led to reduced imports, and it has left more foreign currency in Russian coffers. And the third reason, government intervention. The Kremlin is using its national wealth fund. It has been selling foreign currencies like the US dollar and the British pound. And this helps support the ruble. It fuels the kind of rally that we are now seeing. Russia is confident about its economic trajectory. At the same time, the Kremlin admits that there are challenges ahead.
Right now, our economy is developing quite successfully. It is stable and has a high margin of stability. However, additional efforts will be required given the turbulence we are currently experiencing in the global economy.
So what are these challenges? One of them is the price of oil. Earlier this month, oil prices dropped. 1 barrel of Russia's Urals crude was trading at almost $50. That's the lowest price level in almost 2 years. $50 for a barrel. And the outlook is worsening. Like we just told you, the demand for oil is set to fall. The International Energy Agency and the oil cartel OPEC have both cut forecasts. They say that trade tensions are hitting global demand. And when the demand for energy slows, Russia makes less money. Needless to say, this is bad news for the Russian economy because it depends heavily on energy revenues. Last year, Russia earned more than $100 billion from oil and gas sales. If price drops, if demand falls, Moscow will earn less and it will have less money to spend. In fact, the Russian central bank has issued a warning. If Trump's trade war escalates, global trade will slow down. So will the demand for Russian oil and gas, and this could weaken the Russian economy.
I can say that we will approach this carefully, cautiously, including remembering that last year, after a slowdown at the beginning of the year, inflation raised its head again, and we need to make sure that the current slowdown in the rate of price growth is sustainable. Another factor is the tectonic changes in global trade. They are unfolding before our eyes, and it is still very difficult to judge where they will lead both the global economy and how they will affect Russia. This is a new significant risk that we must take into account.
So falling oil prices is one major risk. The other is a slowing Russian economy. There's also a labor shortage. It is driving up wages. The number of young workers is shrinking. Many of them have been recruited in the military, so there are fewer people to take up other jobs, and this impacts the economy directly because fewer workers means higher labor costs for businesses. The third issue is rising inflation. At the moment, it is above 10%, more than 10% inflation. That's well beyond the Russian central bank's comfort zone. To fight inflation, they hiked interest rates to 21%. So there's a fair bit of pressure on multiple fronts. Does that mean that Russia is in trouble? Well, far from it. The country has weathered worse. Since the Ukraine war, Russia has been under more than 20,000 sanctions, all imposed by the West in a bid to isolate Russia. But Moscow managed to adapt. It found ways to bypass restrictions. It took advantage of the slow, uneven sanctions enforcement. It used its vast natural resources. All of this gave the Russian economy time to adjust. And the result was long-term resilience. Even as pressures mount, Russia's economy remains in the fight. The ruble is holding strong. As the world comes to terms with Trump's trade war, the Russian economy is looking good. Morgan Stanley earlier projected 6.5% growth for India. Now they have cut it to 6.1%. This is for the ongoing financial year, which is from April 2025 to March 2026. They've also revised the rates for the next financial year from 6.5% to 6.3%. And it's not just banks and agencies. Even the Reserve Bank of India has slashed its forecast from 6.7% to 6.5%. So the overwhelming opinion is clear that tariffs will hurt India's economic targets. But don't panic yet, because there are a number of silver linings. For starters, inflation is cooling. Last month, retail inflation fell to 3.34%, which is the lowest level since August 2019. The lowest level of inflation since August 2019. And a big reason for that is food prices. India's inflation is largely driven by seasonal food prices. A good harvest will bring them down. A flood or a heat wave will make it worse. In the month of March, food inflation was just 2.69% in India, which is why overall inflation was also under control. And what about the forecast? Well, that's also good. Experts have predicted a bumper monsoon this year. Again, that is good news for food prices, because Indian farmers are still dependent on a good monsoon. That is their main source of irrigation. It is also good news for the economy as a whole, because lower inflation leaves the door open for interest cuts. Let me explain how. The RBI sets the benchmark lending rate for all Indian banks. Basically, the RBI regulates the interest on your loans. If the rate is lower, more people will take loans. More loans equals more spending. More spending equals more economic activity. That is how central banks spur growth, by controlling the interest rate. But the risk is inflation. If spending rises too much, so will the prices. That is the risk of cutting interest rates to boost growth. But in this case, the RBI has more wiggle room. Inflation is already well under their 2 to 6% target. So there is more scope to cut interest rates. And like I said, this is good news for the Indian economy, especially with Trump's tariffs on the horizon. Another good headline is from the markets. India is the first major market to erase the tariff losses. Now, what does that mean? Trump announced his sweeping tariffs on the 2nd of April. Before that, on April 1st, the Sensex closed at 76,000. I'm sure you know what happened next. The markets had a couple of really bad days. Billions were wiped out from portfolios. Now look at the closing rate today. just a shade over 77,000. So the Indian markets have already recovered to pre-tariff levels. In fact, they have gone beyond those rates. Other major markets have not done this yet. Japan, South Korea, China, Germany, none of them have returned to those levels. But India has. What explains this resilience? For starters, India is not an export-driven economy, not like China or Mexico. So the exposure to the tariffs was always going to be low. Plus, India is seeking a deal with the US. It is not taking on Donald Trump like China is. So investors are more bullish on India. They feel that India is better suited to come out unscathed. Of course, these are still uncertain times. Tomorrow, Trump could threaten India with more tariffs. And before you know it, the markets could tumble again. So we are not saying that the worst is over. We are saying that India is doing better than other major economies. The key is to build on this strong foundation to capitalize on the churn created by Donald Trump. Let's see if India rises to the challenge. Have you ever heard of the lipstick index? When a recession looms, lipstick sales typically go up. Do you know why? Because people cannot afford big luxury items, so they splurge on smaller things, like lipstick, to lift their spirits. When most people think recession, they imagine the big stuff. Stock market crashes, massive layoffs, grim warnings from the JP Morgan CEO. But the first signs are usually more subtle. A cancelled hair appointment, a homemade lunch instead of takeout. Those little everyday choices that add up. And right now, the US is seeing a lot of them. So can these small indicators really predict a recession? Our next report takes a closer look.
Recession forecasting is usually serious business. Economists hunched over GDP charts, obsessing over stock market tremors. Technically, a recession means the economy shrinks for 2 straight quarters. But let's be real. By the time that shows up in official data, everyone has already felt it. Groceries suddenly feel more expensive. Your favorite lunch spot is weirdly empty. And your hair may be overdue for a touch-up. Economists might rely on models and graphs, but out here in the real world, there are stranger and surprisingly more accurate ways to spot an economic downturn. They're called unofficial indicators. Totally unscientific, but eerily on point. Take the humble salon, for example. In 2024, the average American woman spent over $1,000 a year on her appearance. Now, hairstylists are noticing something strange. Appointments are getting pushed back. Clients are asking for cheaper services. And on TikTok, there's a new trend called recession blonde. Women are letting their roots grow in, skipping costly maintenance. Even nails are feeling the pinch. Manicures are out, press-ons are in. In fact, US searches for press-on nails are up 10% since February. But it's not just the beauty routines, it's also the tiny everyday choices people make or don't make when money gets tight. Take men's underwear, and no, we're not kidding. In a recession, underwear sales drop. Why? Because it's one of the first things people stop buying. It's about postponing non-essential purchases. So you stretch what you've got, quite literally. But then there's lipstick, and it does the opposite. Sales actually go up during a downturn. Because even when wallets are squeezed, people still crave a little luxury. And lipstick is perfect. Small, affordable, and mood-lifting. You can't buy a new car or maybe even a new bag, but a $10 lipstick, that's still within reach and it feels like a win. And it's not just what people wear, it's also what they eat and drink too. Take beer, for example. During a recession, craft brews fall flat. Cheap six-packs are back in style. Because taste takes a backseat to savings. And lunch, even that gets a recession makeover. In the United States, more people are bringing meals from home. And it's not just for the protein to carb ratio, it's to save some money. When budgets shrink, the first things to go are the little indulgences. The avocado toast and $5 coffee is out, but homemade lunch is in. Now, these might seem like small sacrifices, but when you stack them up, there's a very real, very quiet economic shift. And they've always existed. Take the hemline index, for example. Historically, skirt lengths could tell you how the economy was doing. During the 1920s, the economy was roaring. And that's when flapper girls showed up with knee-length dresses. It was all about freedom and prosperity. But the 1930s brought with it the Great Depression. Money disappeared, and so did the knees. Hemlines dropped to the ankles, reflecting a more somber conservative era. Of course, with fast fashion, it's harder to track now. But indicators like this show you a bigger picture, because the economy doesn't just live in a silo. Can these quirky metrics really predict a recession? Maybe, not with complete precision, but they do tap into something raw and honest. How we adapt when things look down. Because before the recession makes headlines, it shows up in the details.
Once upon a time, luxury was made in Europe. France had Chanel, Italy had Gucci, the UK had Burberry. The West made these brands. The East made the knockoffs. That was how it worked. But today the picture is quite different. China manufactures a vast majority of luxury goods, sometimes legally, sometimes questionably, but always quietly. That's how it was until last week. But now, those Chinese factories are speaking up, and that too on TikTok.
Do you recognize this style, this bag? Of course you do. For the past more than 30 years, we have been the OEM factory for most of the luxury brands around the world. Gucci, Prada, Coach, Louis Vuitton, you name it. But for this, I am not proud because we were only making our wages. The profit margin for the people who are actually making the bags are very low.
The reason is quite clear. The US and China are fighting a trade war. Washington has imposed 245% in tariffs on China. So Beijing is sitting back, not just with reciprocal tariffs or restrictions, but also with a luxury expose.
You know who is producing high-quality accessories for those luxury brands like Chanel, Estee Lauder, L'Oreal?
You're saying you're the supplier behind all these beauty accessories for those big luxury brands? La Brea, MAC, Chanel, Bobbi Brown, and even Rosewood Hotel.
All these videos have a similar setup. There's a person standing in a factory. They show off luxury goods. They mention the prices. And that is a shocker. I guess everyone knew that luxury goods were overpriced. But the markup and the way it is being presented has caught people's attention. Take a Birkin bag, for example. We told you about this yesterday. A video claims that a bag is made in China for $1,400, all things included. And how much does Hermes sell it for? $38,000. That's a markup of over 2,600%. 2,600% markup.
To sum those up, the total cost will be $1,400 USD for one Birkin out of factory. But why Hermes will charge you $38,000 USD for one bag? That's because more than 90% of the price is paid for its logo. But if you do not care about the logo, you just want the same quality, same material, you can just buy from us. Because for our bags, we use exactly the same material, same leather, same hardware, same edge oil.
Imagine that. For years, luxury brands have carefully curated a fantasy. Part heritage, part exclusivity, and a whole lot of gloss. A handbag from Hermes is not just a bag, it's a passport into an elite club of wealth. A $100 pair of Lululemon leggings is not just another set of pants, it's doing yoga in style. But China is now breaking this illusion one video at a time. It is appealing to Western customers directly with one message. Buy that Birkin, but buy it directly from the source. You will not get the Hermes logo, but at least it will be $37,000 cheaper. So what is Beijing hoping to achieve with this? And more importantly, should you buy these products? Is a $1,400 Birkin too good to be true? And first things first, this is China we are talking about, so take all of this with a pinch of salt, maybe the whole shaker. The videos may just be propaganda supported by state-backed actors with ring lights. The bags may be knockoffs. After all, China is the world's biggest counterfeit producer. It makes 86% of the world's fakes and copies, 86%. So it could be a very high quality dupe. But Beijing's aim here is not to sell these products. It is to undermine Western luxury. You see, luxury brands have spent decades spinning tales. Tuscan leather artisans, French ateliers lit by candlelight, bags stitched by hand. But behind all of this lies a very pragmatic reality, the reality of globalized manufacturing. The bag may say made in Italy, but it's quite possible that only the clasp was attached in Italy. The rest of the bag was made in China. That's a very real possibility. So what these videos do is shatter that image of luxury. And not just that, they're also trying to kill two birds with one stone. They're taking on Western brands, and they're also stirring economic nationalism in China. For years, made in China was seen as cheap. These videos are rebranding it as luxurious. They aim to show China as a producer of quality, not just quantity. So should you buy them? Well, it is an expensive gamble. You may end up with the real thing, or you may end up with a costly counterfeit, and chances are you won't be able to tell the difference. Also, it depends on what you're really looking for. Are you looking for authenticity? Are you looking for quality? Or do you just want the brand logo? Because let's face it, a Birkin is never just a bag. When you pay $38,000 for any bag, you're not really paying for the stitches or the leather, you're paying for the story. And that's the real luxury product. China is not just challenging the product, it is challenging that illusion. And if that myth falls apart, what are we really paying for? The West sold the world a dream, and now China has turned on the lights. Our next story is about Ukraine, a country fighting for survival. Cities are in ruins and foreign aid is drying up, so Ukraine has a new plan to fill its war chest. It is as bold as it is revealing. Ukraine wants to legalize pornography. It sees millions in tax revenue. Imagine OnlyFans as an unofficial defense partner. What is the new cost of freedom? For Ukraine, it could be monthly subscriptions to adult content. For some, this is innovation, but many see this as desperation. Our next report explores.
The war in Ukraine is now in its third year. Kyiv has lost thousands of soldiers. Millions have been displaced. Infrastructure has been destroyed. Western allies are reducing their aid, and Ukraine is fighting for survival.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now.
The war has crippled its economy. Ukraine's coffers are drying up. Kyiv is desperate for funds. So what does a cash-strapped nation do? Apparently, it turns to pornography. Yes, Ukraine wants to legalize the adult entertainment industry. Lawmaker Yaroslav Zhelezhnyak is leading the initiative. Possession, production and distribution of pornography is banned in Ukraine, and Ukrainian lawmakers want to overturn the Soviet-era law. They feel legalizing pornography will boost the economy. It will generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Not to mention, it would free up the Ukrainian police from pursuing the 1,400 cases regarding adult content. The bill has been co-signed by at least 26 lawmakers, including members of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's party. But many Orthodox Christians in Ukraine are questioning the move. They say legalizing pornography will erode the social fabric of the country. Ukrainian churches are calling it a destructive initiative. But is this a strategic move or a sign of despair? The adult content industry generates about $100 billion every year, and one of its emerging contributors is OnlyFans. This digital platform makes more than $6 billion every year, and Ukraine wants to milk this cash cow. Ukrainians have made more than $123 million on OnlyFans. Over 4,400 Ukrainians earn from the platform, but only 10% filed taxes from their earnings, which crossed more than $7 million. And many Ukrainians have been using OnlyFans to raise funds for the army. Lawmakers feel that legalizing pornography could increase tax collections to more than $12 million. And this money could be spent for buying drones, ammunition, or other weapons. But will legalizing pornography solve Ukraine's financial crisis? Well, not particularly. The tax collections won't even make a splash because Kyiv relies heavily on foreign aid, which is not in the millions but billions. The largest amount has come from the United States. It's estimated to be around $128 billion. Then there's Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, followed by other NATO allies like Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, and Sweden. All of these countries have given billions to Ukraine, not to mention the weapons that were given free of cost. Tax collections from pornography won't foot Ukraine's ever-growing war bill. But Ukraine is desperate for funds, and it's open to all options that are on the table, including legalizing pornography. If Ukraine manages to do that, it would be the first country in the world to legalize pornography for funding its military. Will this become a trend? Will war-torn nations turn to unconventional methods for cash? We've already seen crypto donations and crowdsourced drones. And now we may just have OnlyFans-funded artillery.
Now we turn to the forgotten war, the one in Sudan. This week marks 2 years of the civil war. Yet there were no worldwide protests, no social media uproar. Clearly, all eyes are not on the Sudan. But the North African nation is still in turmoil, and the civil war is only escalating. You may remember how it began. Gunfire and explosions rocked the country on April 15, 2023. And at the heart of this chaos are two groups. One is the Sudanese army. The other is a paramilitary group called the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, RSF. Now, these two sides are locked in a power struggle. It's basically an ego clash. Each side is led by a general. Heading the army is General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. Leading the RSF is General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, better known as Hemeti. Now, Burhan and Hemeti are allies turned rivals. In 2021, they were partners. They launched a joint coup. They toppled the Sudanese government. Then they faced a question. Who will rule Sudan, the army or the RSF? Well, they couldn't decide. They couldn't share power. So now they're fighting. They've been fighting for 2 years. Their war has shattered the country. Tens of thousands of innocents have been killed. Nearly 14 million people have been displaced. That's almost 1/3 of the country's population. Hospitals are being bombed. There's a genocide. Waves of ethnic cleansing. Women and children are being mass raped. More than half the population is starving. This is the world's worst humanitarian crisis, created by two power-hungry generals. They have brought their country to knees. And now they're splitting it. Yesterday, the RSF announced a rival government. They said they will govern the areas they control. The RSF is calling it the roadmap for a new Sudan. The Sudan army made a similar announcement in February. Basically, the two rivals want to rule their respective turfs. So who controls what? Let me show you with a map. The RSF recently lost control of the capital, that is Khartoum, but it still holds the Darfur region. This is in the west. The Sudanese army controls the north and the east, including Port Sudan, which gives them access to the Red Sea. Now, the RSF has formed its own government. Experts fear that this will divide the country. This is Africa's third biggest nation we are talking about. It is staring at yet another partition. A few years back, the country of South Sudan was carved from Sudan, and now another split is in the works. What is the international community doing? They're playing the blame game. Ceasefire talks have collapsed. Regional players are taking sides. Egypt and Saudi Arabia back the Sudanese army. The UAE and Chad support the RSF. This has only added fuel to the fire. The African Union remains divided. They're dealing with the refugee crisis coming out of Sudan. The United Nations, as always, is missing. And the Sudanese generals say that they will not end the war anytime soon because both sides claim that victory is around the corner. Like I said, the fighting has forced millions to flee. First within Africa and now to Europe. The number of Sudanese refugees has gone up by 38% in Europe alone. So the West is finally waking up. The United Kingdom held a summit yesterday to discuss the Sudan war. None of the warring sides was present, and the meeting ended with no major decision. Listen to what France had to say.
France has taken note of the roadmap presented by the authorities led by the Sudanese armed forces to restore a political transition. It reiterates the imperative of effective participation by all civilian actors within the framework of a single process. I am particularly concerned by the intentions expressed by various actors to form governments unilaterally and outside of any process of conflict resolution. Let us be clear, the unity of Sudan must be preserved.
The unity of Sudan must be preserved. That's what France said. Germany and the UK said that war is not the solution. They're calling for more dialogue. For the people of Sudan, war is their reality at the moment, and they have a grim outlook.
Violence and violations. There is no solution except for the war to continue until the rebellion ends, because those people have no understanding, they have no vision for the country, they are loyal to other external parties.
So where does the Sudan go from here? Will it be divided again? Will the division bring them peace? Will the world finally wake up to their horror, or will Sudan remain the forgotten war? Our next story tonight is about smuggling. No, not gold or drug smuggling. We will tell you about ant smuggling. Yes, people are trafficking ants now, mainly in East Africa. Kenya has nabbed 4 ant gang smugglers. They captured thousands of ants. They were planning to sell these insects in Europe and Asia and hoping to make thousands of dollars. You heard that right, thousands of dollars for ants. So what's behind this strange trafficking trend, and why are people buying smuggled ants? Here's our report.
Kenya has been embroiled in a decades-long fight against animal trafficking. People smuggle body parts of animals such as elephants, rhinos, and pangolins and sell them for millions of dollars on the black market. Usually, large species of wild animals fall prey to these illegal activities. But in recent years, trafficking trends have seen a change. The focus is shifting to smaller and lesser-known species, like ants. These tiny creatures are witnessing a huge interest among traffickers. Like the 4 smugglers who have been arrested by Kenyan authorities in 2 separate cases. 2 Belgian teenagers have been charged with wildlife piracy. They were found with thousands of ants at their guest house. They reportedly seemed distraught during their appearance in court.
We did not came here to break any laws. By accident and stupidity, we did. And I know breaking laws is for criminals, but I don't feel like a criminal.
But according to authorities, they made calculated attempts to smuggle the ants. They captured 5,000 ants, packed them in thousands of test tubes, and filled them with cotton wool. This would have enabled the ants to survive for months and obscured the contents of the tube. 2 other men have been charged with illegal trafficking in the same courtroom. One of them is Kenyan, the other is Vietnamese. Both the men were arrested in Nairobi, where they were found with 400 ants in their apartments. These cases may sound absurd. After all, why would people capture ants? Because it is a lucrative business. The contraband included the mesocephalotes, or the giant African harvester ants. As the name suggests, they are large. They can grow up to 25 millimeters. They have a bold color. They're native to East Africa and they're considered exotic, mainly in Europe and Asia, where the so-called ant smugglers plan to take them. If they were successful, in all likelihood, they would have made a bounty. The prices vary according to the market, but each giant African harvester ant can be sold for anywhere between $130 to $220, and according to the Kenya Wildlife Service, the total ant contraband is valued at 1 million shillings. That is $7,700. Question is, why are people buying these ants? Demand in this rare insect species is growing rapidly due to their distinct features. Collectors like to keep them in special habitats, which are known as formicariums, and watch them build colonies. So people are keeping ants as pets and paying big bucks to do it. Of course, Kenya is not happy about this. In the country, ants are protected by international biodiversity treaties. Their trade is highly regulated. Because they are critical from an ecological perspective, they help enrich soils, germinate seeds, and provide food for birds and other animals. And Kenya has taken the illegal export of these ants seriously. They say that this not only undermines Kenya's sovereign rights over its biodiversity, but also deprives local communities and research institutions of potential ecological and economic benefits. The Kenya Wildlife Service has called the arrest of ant smugglers a landmark case. The country can only hope that this sets an example and puts a stop to the antics of ant traffickers.
Our last story tonight is about a drink that ancient Egyptian kings were buried with. In ancient China, people revered it as a god. In ancient Greece, poets said that drinking it is like tasting the pleasures of life before death. In case you haven't guessed it, I'm talking about wine. For centuries now, wine has had quite the fan following, but in the modern world, this fandom is slowly fading. The main trade body of wine has released a report. It looks at government data from around the world, and here's what it says. Last year, wine consumption hit its lowest level in decades. Global sales fell 3.3% compared to 2023. They reached about 214 million hectoliters. 1 hectoliter is 100 liters. So 214 million hectoliters seems like a very big number, but apparently it's not. It is the lowest global sales figure since 1961, the lowest in more than 60 years. So wine sales are in the red, and so is wine production, which has also hit the lowest level in more than 60 years. Production fell by 4.8% in 2024. Now, if you look closely, there are some anomalies, like India. India's vineyard area is growing dramatically. It is expanding at an annual rate of 4.5%. Or Spain and Portugal. These are among the few European markets where consumption has increased. Europe is the world's biggest wine producer. It accounts for nearly half of global sales. But last year, consumption fell by 2.8%. France is one of the key producers of wine. It consumed 3.6% less wine last year. And the US is in the same boat. It is the world's top wine consumer. It saw a fall of 5.8% last year. That's the US. And there is not one but 3 reasons why this is happening. 1 is health concerns. 2, change in consumption patterns. And 3, climate change. We'll start with the last one. Climate change, global warming. It has fueled environmental extremes. It has hurt wine production. Take Italy, for instance. It used to be the world's top producer of wine, but extreme floods and droughts have ruined the crop. And in 2023, it lost the title of the biggest producer. Or look at the US. Last year, its wine output fell by about 17%, mainly because of extreme heat. And these examples are everywhere, but that's not the biggest reason why wine is falling out of favor. The biggest reason is health concerns. It's rising awareness about wine. You may have heard of the French paradox. This concept came up in the early 1990s. What is the French paradox? They said red wine was good for your heart. Moderate consumption of red wine will lower the risk of heart disease. Studies raved about the benefits of wine and sales took a leap. For years, the wine industry has benefited from this notion. But here's the catch. Many of these studies were fueled by the alcohol industry. Basically, winemakers paid money to create this positive perception. They showed the benefits of drinking, and people bought their claims and their bottles. But that is no longer the case. Such research has long been debunked. People now know that there is no safe level of drinking any kind of alcohol, including wine. Nothing is safe. According to studies, 1 bottle of wine per week is as bad as 5 cigarettes for men and 10 for women. And consumers are increasingly aware about this risk. Now couple this with a third factor, the change in consumption patterns. Young people are having lesser wine. Experts say there is a generational fall in consumption. And those who want to are having trouble buying it. Because look at the cost. The average consumer now pays about 30% more for a bottle than in 2020. So prices have shot up dramatically. In the last 5 years, wine consumption has fallen by 12%. Simply put, the societal view of wine is changing, the industry is beset with challenges, and the future of wine is not looking good. It seems that wine o'clock will soon be marked with a glass half empty. You may or may not like Donald Trump, but you have to admit he's a brave man. Who else would challenge the Chinese to a math face-off? And that's what it is now. It's a question of who can throw up the bigger number. Trump has gone all the way up to 245%. It's a bit like those games of poker you see on TV. Very high stakes, very dramatic moves, and a lot of money on the line. The question is, who will fold first? People on the internet are wondering too. Take a look. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. A drone video captures multiple Russian strikes in Ukraine's Kherson. Authorities rescue a hiker stranded on a California cliff. And a Michigan town moves 9,100 books one by one to a bookshop's new location. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 2005, Pakistan's former military ruler turned president Pervez Musharraf arrived in India to watch a cricket match. Musharraf even praised Indian hospitality. During this trip, he held meetings with then Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh. This was his first visit to the country since the failed Agra summit in 2001. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Just stay there. Forward 2. All right, they're on the cliff up here. Okay. Let's give them some space here. You're welcome. Oh, that's okay. All right. It's got a short final ice out. It's going to be a little tight for that little hole. Paper dart.
That's better.
Oh yeah, now we're talking.